Hey, what's up? GERO 508. All right, so this is the short video that I am producing. That's to help you understand the physiology slash biology that is behind the stress response. And we use the stress response all day long, off and on. It's a continuum. It's on, it's off. It just flows depending on what it is you're doing. Just getting up out of the chair, for example, I needed to have a little change in terms of my stress response, whether I'm eating or not, whether I'm waking up or not. This is all part of the stress response. All right. So we're visualizing my account in Brightspace as like it would be for a USC student. These are all your classes. This is my summer 2024 account. I have 2 classes. I'm going to click on your class and go right in. Alrighty. So what we're going to do is we're going to go straight into the module 1. And in module 1, I have this special section that is just below my traditional place where I put my lectures, where I'm going to be talking about the physiology of stress. And I'll be using charts for this, okay? How do I access this? I can go through content right here, okay? I've shown you that before. Or I can use the visual content area, which is on the right-hand side. And here's module 1 right there. So we'll just go click right on here. And it's going to take us directly into module 1. All right. Now, again, you see how content is underlined. If I went to content, it's taking me straight back to where we were at. It gives you this table of contents. You can see it's highlighted here in gray as to where we're in right now. We're in this module 1. If I click on this, it'll take me to module 2. And you can see how it's highlighted right here, okay? That's not what we want because this is the very beginning, module 1. Alrighty, now this primer gives you some important perspective to understand the almost hour-long documentary, Stress, the Portrait of a Killer, by Robert Sapolsky. So it's really good background for you. And again, I'm going to make this easy to digest, guys, so don't worry about this. My traditional lecture video is going to go right here. It's empty right now. If we click right here, this is, again, some basics and how to understand our response to stress, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and open this guy up, all right? It's downloading, all right? And there it is. All right, let me get my enable editing part out of here. And there it is. Okay, awesome. Now, I would like to go presentation mode, but I have learned the hard way that in this particular program, when I'm making this recording, it can freeze up. So we're just going to leave it like this, okay? All right, so what are we doing here, all right? So when we look at our stress response, okay, what is our at any point in time, there's little minor stressors, there's big stressors, there's something in the middle, all right? And depending on what we're doing, we need to have a fairly rapid system for getting our bodies on board, okay? So, for example, I hear something and I turn around and I look at it, okay? I have a little adrenaline rush. I need to dilate my pupils, make them go from constricted to dilated so I can take in as much visual information as I can to assess the situation, all right? Now, if it's truly, really stressful, and it's a little kind of life-threatening, okay, then I'm going to shut off things I don't need, all right? We actually shut off the immune system because that is long haul. In that moment in time, we don't need much immunity, okay? So we shut off the immune system, we shut off our gastrointestinal system, all right? We don't need to be absorbing food right now if we're being threatened, chased by a lion, or caught in a dark alley or something like that, okay? And we also will, for example, will inhibit the flow of saliva, okay? So psychologically, okay, it's very stressful, for example, to do public speaking. And you'll find when you're up there in the GERO auditorium or wherever you're at and you're doing a seminar, that all of a sudden you get cotton mouth, okay? And that's from the action of adrenaline, okay? Now what we see here is these are direct wires, okay? This is the direct wiring during stress, and this is the direct wiring that is the complete polar opposite that releases a completely different set of neurotransmitters that shuts things off. So this turns everything on that you want when you're being stressed on, and then this turns off the things that you don't need when you're relaxing, okay? It will turn on things that you can do, for example, to eat, because you're usually not eating when you're being chased by a lion, all right? So these are, again, examples from the brain. Everything goes to the spinal cord. We see here, right here, right here. There's a unique anatomy behind it that's really kind of beyond this class, okay? We see the very top part right here. That's our cervical spinal cord, and this is where the wires go from the brain connecting to this part of the spinal cord, and then they leave, and then they go and make direct contacts out here with the organs that you're trying to affect, okay? With respect to the adrenaline rush, okay? Adrenaline is released all through here, right here. This is your fight or flight response. Anatomically, you can see it's different, okay? So the message from the brain goes down to this part of the spinal cord right here, okay? The thoracolumbar part, okay? Then it makes a connection with these guys. They send their axons out here, okay? That then synapse with these little kind of, they're like little way stations, okay? Little train stations that then send their axons out. These are called ganglia, okay? Sympathetic ganglia. And they send their axons out to the eyes, to the hearts, to the lungs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So during this fight or flight response, this adrenaline rush, okay, we dilate our pupils, okay? We stop the flow of saliva. We're going to accelerate our heart rate because we need to get the blood to our skeletal muscles so we can run, get the blood to our heart so we can beat faster, and get the blood to our brains so that we are at our peak in terms of processing what's going on, okay? Now, we're getting all the blood out there, okay? That blood needs to be oxygenated and it needs to have a lot of glucose in it because what we're basically asking the body to do is to produce energy, okay? Internal combustion engines, where we're going to combine oxygen with glucose, and when we burn through the glucose, oxygen with fat, okay? All right, so how does this all work, okay? So we need oxygen in the blood, so we're going to open up our bronchi. We're going to increase the rate that we breathe, okay? So lots more oxygen, okay? I'm going to shut off my digestive system, right? Because I don't need to be digesting food when I'm being chased by a lion, okay? What I do need is glucose, right? So this, and it's immediate. Yes, there could be some food in my stomach, but the speed at which food in the stomach is converted to glucose in the blood is so slow that it's out of the picture, okay? So we do have a warehouse of glucose, and that is in our livers. And we're going to cleave it. We're going to cut the glycogen, which is these long chains of connected glucose, free it up, goes into the blood, and now it goes to my brain so my neurons can fire when it combines glucose with oxygen, all right? Making ATP. You guys remember that? Okay. Alrighty. As a backup, okay, we have this hardwire to the very core of the adrenal gland, okay? The outer shell is the cortex, the core is called the medulla, and this releases a bunch of adrenaline into the blood as well. I don't need to be peeing when I'm being chased by a lion, so it shuts it off. All right, so it's all over. I can now basically regroup, okay, revitalize, okay, even get some food in me, okay, to refuel the rest of my body, okay, because I burned up a lot of energy, okay, tore things down, need to stimulate the immune system, etc. So now we have the parasympathetic nervous system. It doesn't release adrenaline, it releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. So right here, the acetylcholine gets released onto the eye, and my pupils contract. Then my eyes become weary, less information coming in, okay? I'm gonna stimulate the release of saliva now, okay? It's costly over here, so I shut it off, but here I'm gonna stimulate the release, get me going in terms of being able to digest food, all right? I'm gonna slow my heart rate, I'm gonna reduce the diameter of my bronchi, all right? So that requires less energy in my breathing now. Slow the rate that I'm breathing, okay? I'm gonna increase the movement of food and increase digestion in my stomach and intestines, okay? I'm gonna release bile from my liver via the gallbladder because that's gonna help me digest any fat that was in my meal, okay? I'll go pee, all right? So that's how that works right there. Awesome. Okay, so let's go to slide number 2, okay? All right, so we see, I'll move my face out of the way here in a second, but we see the second companion system. That was all hardwired. How about let's release hormones into the bloodstream that are going to be kind of backup and also a way of monitoring what's going on in terms of how well we're dealing with the stress, okay? Alrighty, so we perceive a stress, okay? Visual information, anything for our senses, okay? We can hear something, okay? We can smell something, and we immediately set off the alarm. And through that alarm, we're going to learn all about the key elements, but the final way station, kind of the air traffic controller of the brain that brings on board the body, is the hypothalamus, okay? It's located here at the very base of the brain. Hypothalamus is unique is that it kind of connects the brain to our bloodstream. What it does is it releases hormones into the bloodstream, all right? So for the stress response, okay, the hypothalamus releases this hormone right here. We call it corticotropin releasing factor, or CRF. It goes to the pituitary gland, a gland that is outside the brain, that is dangling from the hypothalamus. And then the pituitary gland releases another hormone right here. It's called ACTH, and that is adrenal corticotropin hormone that goes racing down to our adrenal glands via the bloodstream. So the whole, anything that is endocrine or hormonal, it's only going to get there by traveling in the blood, all right? And then when the ACTH binds with the outer shell of the adrenal gland, the adrenal cortex, it causes the release of cortisol, and the cortisol then serves some important jobs. So let's move my image over here, okay? All right, so first, cortisol released by the adrenal glands, we see down here, okay, provides a huge amount of glucose, okay? So it goes to the liver as well and says, release the glucose, okay? It actually will tell the liver, let's convert some of your key proteins into glucose. We can make new proteins later. We're in a very stressful situation, all right? So it's providing a backup of fuel, right? Super important. The second job is, we see over here, is it's always sending information back to the pituitary and back to just the presence of that hormone. It goes, there are sensors in the pituitary and sensors in the hypothalamus and the hippocampus, basically saying, hey, is the stress over? Because if it is, this is a negative feedback principle. It's a principle of engineering. I'm just going to go back there and let you know, hey, there's high levels in the blood. Can we shut it off? Okay, so it's key for shutting off this, the stress system. However, if you are still seeing something stressful, hearing something stressful, your brain will override that shut off from the hormone cortisol. So this is the release of cortisol, doing all kinds of things that we talked about here, but it's also feeding back, trying to shut the system off. All right, cool. Let's go look over here now, okay? I'll just put myself over here, get myself out of the way, okay? So again, we look at the examples of the hardwiring. So remember I said the air traffic controller of the brain, okay? The hypothalamus, which is at the very bottom. We're gonna see that we have other parts of the brain that are kind of registering the level of threat at any point in time, and they connect with the hypothalamus, okay? The amygdala is a big one. We'll learn about him. He's our anger center, okay? So anyways, based on activation of the hypothalamus, it sends the nerve impulses. So we saw this right here, okay? Let's go back here. So the nerve impulses, like this, okay? But now we're looking at it right here. So we see it comes down the spinal cord, makes a synapse here, makes a connection. This guy sends its axon out like so, okay? And it makes a connection here with the adrenal gland, or as we saw earlier, with all those ganglia, okay? We're just looking at the adrenal gland, the core, like it's like a ganglia. What it does then is it releases, you see here, norepinephrine into the bloodstream, okay? This is adrenaline, basically. It's a form of adrenaline. Awesome, okay. Now, at the same time, we have this slow response right here, okay? Again, this is now the hypothalamus not having hardwired down to the spinal cord like we saw here, but the hypothalamus, okay, connecting directly with the pituitary gland, releasing a hormone into the bloodstream. That hormone then activates a special cells here that release another hormone into the bloodstream that we see right here that goes down and activates the outer shell to release cortisol. All right? All right, so that's the physiology of this. All right, so now let's kind of look at what's going on here in terms of our perception of stress. all right? And how sadly, we hijack this system that evolutionarily is supposed to really, really protect us in terms of a direct threat from a predator or very, very stressful physiological situations. For example, you don't have any food or it's extreme cold, things like that, okay? Alrighty, but when now we tap into it with, there's my dogs, look at them, they're all super excited, okay? We tap into this stress response, but when we're just like, oh my God, that person didn't like my post in Facebook, and you get this adrenaline rush, okay? Or, oh my God, how am I going to pay my student loan? So it's a chronic stress, all right? So this is this hijacking concept, all right? So how does it normally work? We have it over here, number one. You guys can blow this up, okay? But I'm just going to go through this. So we have a decision maker part of the brain. The very front part of our brain decides about how we react to anything at any point in time. It's our emotional brain. It's part of this system called the limbic system, and it's just a way we modulate and react to different things, threats or situations in life. Okay, it relies on information from the past and it projects forward. Okay, you're based on the past. This is what I'm deciding that we should do in terms of your body's physiology, in terms of the stress response. Okay, alrighty. So here it is right here, showing the character here, kind of pondering. That was a low-key stress, not too big. Okay, my decision-making part of my brain, the prefrontal cortex, right here, is like saying, you know what, compared to what I've seen before, which is your hippocampus down here, okay, your memory center, yeah, that wasn't so bad, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off the amygdala, all right? Because you get inputs from your senses to the amygdala trying to say, it's game on. And depending on how much you activate those sensors, the amygdala will try and then recruit the stress response. The amygdala goes straight to the hypothalamus and says, game on, all right? But we're going to shut it off, okay? Because our prefrontal cortex, the most evolved part of our brains, as human beings, has the ability to, like, you know what, maybe not this time, okay? I want you to just go back, kick back. This was not a big deal, okay? Alrighty, but if the threat is serious, all right, all the information bombards the amygdala, okay? We shut off the prefrontal cortex, and then it's game on. Activate the stress response, okay? And that's part number two, showing this guy just freaked out, okay? And this goes about the different types of moods and changes in your behavior when you have this hijack, okay? When it comes to number three, we're feeding back here, okay? And what's happening here with number three? I'm going to get myself out of the way here. Number three, I will never forget that, okay? So, and we've all had those kind of challenges in our life, where you learn from your mistakes, you learn from a situation, and you'll never do that again, okay? And so what happens is the memories are formed in the hippocampus, and the hippocampus forms really strong connections with the amygdala, so that if, for example, if every time you hear a sound or you have the smell, it was life-threatening, then you're going to reduce the processing of that by forming stronger connections with your memory center and the amygdala, which is your anger, rage, fear center. All right? Awesome. Okay, let's go to the next one here. All right. So this shows you, I'm going to just get myself completely out of the way here, what happens when we have a chronic, unremitting, unrelenting stress, okay, a psychological stress, like, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder, okay, like which is an anxiety disorder, or just really high-blown anxiety, severe clinical depression, okay. So what happens there, okay? Well, the problem is, okay, we need to have the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus to inform us to shut off the stress response, okay? And when you have psychological illness, what happens is the hippocampus shrinks and the prefrontal cortex shrinks. You see these downward arrows, and the rage center, the one that makes us overreact, grows in strength, okay? So this is what's going on through here. So there's this negative feedback. Normally the prefrontal cortex, normally the hippocampus is able to shut off the amygdala, but because they're shrinking now, the amygdala becomes more active, and any part of the nervous system that is more active grows and increases in its strength, okay? And that's what we're showing again right here, okay? So strong activation, okay, turns on the fight or flight response, okay? The prefrontal cortex is always sitting there, examining what our old memories said, okay, looking at the incoming information and deciding how to react, okay. All right, so during weak stresses, okay, it takes the information from the hippocampus and it says we're going to shut you off. All right. All right, so let's take a look at this scenario here. What happened? Why is everything cattywampus when you have chronic anxiety disorder, when you have clinical depression? Why are these two brain areas shrinking? And this is bad because this is, we actually get what's called a cortisol dementia, okay? A stress-related dementia where you show signs of dementia because this learning and memory center has begun to shrink, okay? In addition, your decision-making processes, okay, your executive is shrinking as well, and you're more likely to make really poor decisions. Why is this all happening? Okay. All right, so this is the next slide right here, slide number 6, okay? So we're looking at kind of the interaction, okay? Now I mentioned a key function of cortisol, okay? That is, this is a fancy name for cortisol, glucocorticoid. It's a catechory, a receptor, okay? So we have perceived distress. The hypothalamus is now releasing the factors. It goes down to my pituitary releases ACTH, and then you release cortisol. This is going to be going, if I had an arrow this way, remember it's going to be providing fuel, okay? It's going to turn things off you don't need and turn things on that you do need, because this is, a very challenging time, okay, in your life. At the same time, it's always has this, and this is scientific figure legend reflection of trying to turn something off. Okay, so anytime you see this line with a bar, it's a negative feedback. So as long as you have a bunch of cortisol, it's always trying to shut it off. Shut it off here, shut it off there, and shut it off here. However, if the incoming information in the brain is no, the stress is not over, it overrides this and you don't shut it off, okay? All righty, so that's just the way it works. But the bad news is high levels of cortisol begin to eat away at the hippocampus, okay? And also will begin to eat away at the prefrontal cortex, okay? Here's the amygdala that is being activated, turning on the hypothalamus, like I showed you before, okay? All righty, so we go to the next slide here, right? So if now my negative feedback is becoming faint, okay, because I'm not able to activate this system to turn it off, because you start losing the receptors that respond to this cortisol, the neurons begin to shrink, they actually wither away. It looks just like dementia, okay? And so what happens then is now the amygdala gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It rages. So now every time you have a thought that is kind of just a rumination of something bad, because this system is so big, it just rages, and you release more cortisol that causes more eating away at the feedback, and you can see this becomes this downward spiral, okay? All righty, very cool. So that's how that all works. So this is, again, just kind of an overview right here. What is the stress response? Why do we need the stress response when we're challenged, okay? All right, so the amygdala is sampling all incoming sensory information. If things are bad, you turn on their stress response. The amygdala activates the adrenaline system via the direct wiring action, okay, rapidly in the nervous system, okay? And it activates what's called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And this is more for fuel than anything else. This is the cortisol. The cortisol is released by this HPH axis, okay, giving you more glucose, okay? But chronic stress comes at an expense to the body, okay? Because cortisol affects immunity, right? And adrenaline also affects immunity. So you become hyper-inflamed. So we've heard about inflammation. A lot of you maybe are dietitians and you are helping in terms of prescribing anti-inflammatory diets. High levels of anxiety and stress, as seen in people that are clinically depressed, that have high levels of anxiety, elevates the level of inflammation in the body as well. Okay, cortisol, okay, decreases the way insulin receptors works. Okay, so and you're fueling all this release of glucose that if you're sitting there just not doing anything, you're not running from a line, it gets turned into fat. Okay, so part of the problem with cortisol is it tips the scale towards obesity. It also causes insulin receptor insensitivity that results in diabetes, that causes even more inflammation. Okay, so these are all put together. They're all very related. Okay, like I said, chronic stress is going to kill off the very brain areas designed to shut it off. Right, so it begins to shut off the hippocampus, and it begins to shut off the prefrontal cortex. Okay, it's crucial to learning and memory. So this is a contributing factor to dementia. Like I said, the decision maker begins to die off. Okay, and this is huge in terms of a contributing factor to clinical depression. Right. These are all different things that you should kind of understand. Very important in terms of your understanding of the stress response as we now go through the rest of the curriculum. Okay. Hopefully you found that, guys. You guys found that helpful, right? And peace, and we'll see you next time.